is a document sitting in the Vinton County Court of Common Pleas right now, filed by J. Thomas Stolley, the attorney representing Elizabeth Siders. And what it says, what Elizabeth Siders is actually asking for, in writing through her lawyer, with the judge's name at the top of the filing, is something that, when I read it, I genuinely had to stop and reread. She wants to go back, not to Hamden, not to Ohmer Road specifically, but back to the household she came from, back to the people who were removed from that property on June 30th and placed in the care of the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. The filing says, and I want to quote this carefully because the exact language matters, that through conversations with counsel, Elizabeth Siders maintains that her principal desire is to reunite with those under her care. The filing acknowledges that reunification of any kind is an impossibility if she doesn't appear before the court. And it argues that because those individuals have now been removed from her care, she would not pose a threat to them if released. That's the argument. That's what her lawyer filed. And I've been sitting with it for days now, trying to figure out how to talk about it honestly. Because it raises a question that I don't think has a simple answer. A question that legal experts, behavioral scientists, and frankly anyone following this case, is now sitting with. Is this staged? Is this a calculated legal move? A piece of paper designed to make Elizabeth look like a grieving mother rather than a defendant, to generate sympathy before a grand jury convenes, to lay groundwork for a defense that positions her as someone who never meant harm? Or is this real? Is this a woman, someone who entered this family at 15, who has been inside it for 18 years, who by her own brother's account was indoctrinated to the point where she lost touch with her family of origin for 15 years? Is this a woman who genuinely, deeply, in whatever way she understands relationships and love and attachment, wants the people she raised back? Because here's the thing, both of those can be true at the same time. And that's the part that makes this case so genuinely hard to think through. Let me back up and give you the full picture of where things stand right now. All four defendants: Elizabeth Siders, 33, her husband Gary Siders Jr., 36, his father Gary Siders Sr., 73, and his mother Christina Siders, 67, waived their preliminary hearings on July 7th. That decision sent the case directly to a grand jury. No date has been set for the grand jury to convene. Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer has said grand jury hearings typically occur every other month, and he hoped to have an update within 2 weeks. Special Prosecutor Kara Keating, a former Franklin County prosecutor, has been appointed to lead the case. Each of the four defendants faces 16 counts of second-degree felony child endangerment. Under Ohio law, each count carries a maximum sentence of 8 to 12 years. If convicted on all counts and sentenced consecutively, each defendant could face more than 100 years in prison. That's the legal reality. And inside that reality, Elizabeth Siders' attorney filed a motion to reduce or eliminate her $300,000 bond. The filing argues that she has no prior criminal history. It argues that she would not pose a threat now that those in her care are no longer under her supervision. And it states her principal desire is reunification. Now, Stolley is a defense attorney. His job is to advocate for his client. Filing a bond reduction motion that emphasizes his client's emotional connection to her family is a normal part of that advocacy. That's not manipulation. That's legal representation. So before we read this filing as evidence of something sinister, it's worth understanding that bond reduction motions are standard procedure. And the language about reunification is part of an argument for why she should be released while awaiting trial. But it's also not nothing, because it tells us something about how Elizabeth Siders, or at least how her attorney is framing Elizabeth Siders, understands her own situation. She doesn't apparently see herself primarily as someone who failed those in her care. She sees herself as someone who was separated from them. That framing is either the most authentic thing in this entire case, or the most calculated, and the answer to which one it is may be the central legal question of Elizabeth's trial whenever it happens. Let me come back to the competency question because Gary Siders Sr.'s situation is moving simultaneously and it matters to the larger picture. His attorney, Dorian Baum, has been pursuing two tracks. The competency evaluation, ordered by Judge Laina Fetherolf Rogers, agreed to by Prosecutor Archer, is now underway or about to begin. And Baum is also considering a not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect defense, which addresses Gary Sr.'s state of mind at the time the alleged conduct occurred, rather than his current mental state. During the transfer from the Southeastern Ohio Regional Jail to a medical facility, Gary Sr. fell and was hospitalized. He was taken to Ohio Health Oblinus Hospital in Athens. An additional medical condition was discovered there, and he was recommended for transfer to a larger facility. His $300,000 cash bond was modified to a recognizance bond with GPS monitoring, not to give him freedom, but to allow Vinton County to avoid being responsible for his hospital costs while keeping him under supervision. Prosecutor Archer said publicly that Gary Sr.'s medical care could place an extraordinary financial burden on the county. Vinton County has fewer than 13,000 residents. The costs of housing, caring for, and managing the medical needs of an elderly defendant facing charges of this magnitude are not insignificant for a county that size. And here is something that I think about when I look at all four defendants and try to understand this case as a whole, rather than through the lens of any individual. This family, Gary Siders Sr., Christina Siders, Gary Siders Jr., and Elizabeth Siders, was reportedly living on a combination of state benefits and rental payments when they were arrested. Christina Siders and Gary Siders Sr. were confirmed to be receiving state benefits from Ohio at the time of their arrests. The family was paying rent at the Ohmer Road property. They had some level of connection to government systems, and yet, according to investigators, 16 individuals were found in a single room, in a property that first responders described as being in extreme disrepair, in conditions that officials publicly described as the most serious they had encountered in their careers. The contradiction between state benefits enrollment and what was found inside that house is one of the things investigators are still trying to piece together. Former prosecutor Payne said investigators are almost certainly still gathering evidence that the family had been in Vinton County for about 4 years, but that some of those in the household had traveled to other counties in Ohio and possibly out of state, including, investigators have now confirmed, to Wisconsin at some point before arriving in Vinton County. The investigation extends beyond Ohmer Road. It extends beyond Vinton County. It potentially extends beyond Ohio's borders. And that investigation, the one happening in the background, the one that doesn't make daily headlines but that is building the case that will eventually be presented to a grand jury, is the thing that will ultimately determine what happens to all four defendants. Now let me talk about what's happening in the comment sections and on social media around this case, because I think it's actually relevant to the question this video poses. Since Elizabeth's bond motion became public, the reaction online has split almost perfectly down the middle. On one side, people who read the filing as evidence of genuine maternal attachment, who say that whatever happened in that household, whatever failures of care occurred, Elizabeth Siders is still the person who raised those individuals, that her desire to be reunited with them is real, human, and not incompatible with also being a person who failed them, that someone can love the people in their care and still have been incapable of providing what those people needed. On the other side, people who read the filing as strategy, who point out that asking to be reunited with the same people you're accused of endangering is either deeply delusional or deeply calculated, who argue that a competent defense attorney doesn't put that language in a filing by accident, that it's designed to generate exactly the kind of sympathy conversation that's happening right now. And here's my honest take on both of those positions. Neither is obviously wrong. The people who think it's genuine aren't wrong that Elizabeth Siders' emotional connection to those in her care could be real. Whatever the conditions of that household were, she was inside them for 18 years. The relationships she formed there are the primary relationships of her adult life. Her attorney said she doesn't necessarily characterize herself as a victim, which is interesting. It doesn't mean she sees herself as a perpetrator either. It might mean she sees herself as someone who loves her family and who is now separated from them and wants to go back. The people who think it's staged aren't wrong either, because Stolley is a skilled attorney. He knows what he's doing, and a bond reduction motion that emphasizes reunification is effective advocacy because it humanizes a defendant who, in the public imagination, has been framed primarily as one of 4 adults responsible for serious conditions inside a household. It reframes the narrative. Instead of defendant, it presents her as someone separated from family. Instead of accused, it presents her as someone who wants to return. That reframing is important because the grand jury that will eventually consider this case is made up of human beings who read the news, who have opinions about this case, who will bring their assumptions into that grand jury room, and the side that gets to shape the narrative first, or most effectively, has an advantage. So is this staged or is it true? My answer, honestly, is it's probably both. Not in a cynical way, in a human way. Elizabeth Siders, if her brother is right that she was indoctrinated into this family structure, may have formed genuine and deep attachments that coexist with whatever the legal reality of her culpability turns out to be. Her attorney may be using those genuine attachments as strategically effective material in a bond reduction filing. Those two things don't cancel each other out. A person can genuinely want to reunite with their family and also benefit from that desire being in a court filing. Let me now talk about where the case goes from here, because several tracks are moving simultaneously, and it's worth laying them out clearly. Gary Siders Jr. had a separate court date scheduled for July 23rd related to the 4 public indecency charges that originally brought deputies to Ohmer Road on June 30th. Those charges are proceeding on their own track, separate from the endangerment case. Gary Siders Sr. is undergoing a court-ordered competency evaluation. The result of that evaluation will determine whether his case proceeds on the same timeline as the others, or whether it gets separated and placed on a different track pending restoration of competency. Elizabeth's bond motion is pending. The judge will decide whether to reduce or eliminate the $300,000 bond. If the judge grants a reduction and she makes bond, she would be released from custody subject to conditions. But she would not be permitted to have contact with those who were removed from Ohmer Road. The filing itself acknowledges this. It argues for release in part because those individuals are no longer in her care, not in order to reunite with them immediately. So even the reunification framing comes with that caveat. She wants to go back to them eventually. She can't go back to them now. The filing is asking for release based on the argument that the risk she would have posed has been eliminated by the removal of those under her care. That's an interesting legal argument. And it's one that the prosecutor will challenge, because the state's position, presumably, is that the removal of those in her care doesn't eliminate her culpability for what happened while they were in her care. The question before the grand jury isn't what she might do in the future. It's what the evidence shows happened over the years before June 30th, 2026. Former prosecutor Payne has suggested the grand jury process will be lengthy given the scope of the case. Former prosecutor Tommy Pope has noted that trying 4 defendants with complex and potentially divergent defense strategies raises serious questions about whether they should be tried together or separately. And legal analyst Lauren Conlon noted on News Nation that there are a lot of layers here, that the 2008 marriage certificate, the brothers' claims of indoctrination, the unconfirmed social media posts about prior contact with state welfare systems, all of it will eventually need to be sorted out in a legal proceeding. We still don't know what the state knew, if anything, Conlon said. That question, what Ohio's welfare systems knew or should have known about this family across multiple counties over nearly 2 decades, is one that the investigation is apparently still actively trying to answer. One thing circulating this week involves unverified claims from retail employees, shared on social media, alleging that the family regularly purchased bulk quantities of vegetable oil and bottled water, but no other perishable or nutritional food. These claims have not been confirmed by authorities. I want to be clear about that. They are unverified, but they were widely circulated, and they paint a picture of a household maintaining life at the most basic level possible through a specific and sustained pattern of provision. That pattern, if confirmed, speaks to knowledge and intent in ways that matter legally. But unverified is unverified. Investigators will follow up, whether there is documented evidence, receipts, loyalty card data, store surveillance. that supports or contradicts those claims is something the investigation will presumably address. The investigation is active. Evidence is still being gathered. The grand jury has not yet convened. No indictments have been issued. All 4 defendants have pleaded not guilty. Let me end where I started. With Elizabeth's filing, there's something in the language of that document that I keep returning to. The phrase principal desire. Not hope, not wish. Principal desire. As in, above everything else, what she wants most is to go back. I don't know what to do with that exactly. I've been covering this case for weeks now, and I still don't know what to do with that. Because if Elizabeth Siders was brought into this family at 15, if she was isolated from her own relatives for 15 years, if her own brother says she was indoctrinated, if her education stopped at the 8th grade and her entire adult experience has been inside this one family structure, then the people who were removed from Ohmer Road on June 30th are not just people in her care. They are, in the deepest sense, her whole world. And wanting your whole world back isn't staged. Even when the world in question is one that the state has determined was not a safe environment for the people inside it. That's not a defense to the charges against her. The charges are about what the evidence shows happened, not about what Elizabeth Siders wanted or didn't want. The grand jury will evaluate the evidence. The court will apply the law. The legal process will run its course. But the question this video asks, is this staged or true? I think the honest answer is that it's both. And that both being true at the same time is exactly why this case is so much harder to process than a straightforward criminal prosecution. There are 4 people charged. There are 16 individuals who were removed from that household. There is an investigation that spans multiple counties and possibly multiple states. There is a 2008 marriage document that a family law attorney says a judge absolutely could have stopped. There is a brother who came forward after 15 years of silence to say his sister was indoctrinated. There is a competency evaluation underway for a 73-year-old man whose attorney says he cannot describe basic facts about himself. There is a 33-year-old defendant whose principal desire, according to her own court filing, is to go back. None of this resolves cleanly. None of it is supposed to. The legal system will work through what it's designed to work through. Evidence, charges, proceedings, verdicts. That's slow, and it should be slow. It should be deliberate. It should be fair to everyone involved, including the 4 defendants who have all pleaded not guilty and who are all presumed innocent until proven otherwise. But the human question, the one that doesn't get resolved in a courtroom, is the one this case keeps forcing me back to. What does it mean to love people and fail them at the same time? What does it mean to have created a world and then have that world taken away and then file a motion asking to go back to it? What does it mean for a legal system to look at that filing and have to decide, coldly and procedurally, whether releasing someone on reduced bond serves the interests of justice? Those questions don't have legal answers. They have human ones. And the humans who will eventually sit on the grand jury and then on trial juries if this case gets that far will have to carry those questions with them into the room. Elizabeth Siders wants her family back. The state says she endangered them. The investigation is still ongoing. And somewhere in Vinton County, Ohio, in the offices of a special prosecutor and a county court in the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the evidence that will eventually answer the legal version of this question is still being assembled. If you want to follow this case as the grand jury convenes and the legal proceedings develop, subscribe to Crime Uncovered. We'll be here for every verified development. The question this case keeps asking doesn't have a clean answer, but it deserves to be asked.